But another one is that between the last summit in Quebec, Canada in 2001 and the next one projected for Argentina in 2005, several things have happened. We've had the events of September the 11th. We've had shocks to democratic systems, shocks to the economies of nations, and concerns in the hemisphere about whether democracy can make it, whether democracy is good enough. And this summit coming up in Mexico in January of next year is aimed at focusing the three areas of most concern to leadership in the hemisphere and to people in the hemisphere. And they are: what do you do to get growth going, number one, and reducing poverty? Number two, what about investing in people in terms of health and education?
So that'd be the social services side.
Social side. And thirdly, democratic governance, fighting corruption, advancing the notion of transparency, which we kind of take for granted in this country, but which means that there be out in the open how the tax system functions, how the customs system functions, how government contracts are granted, and how people do business.
Will this also enter in and bring about a stronger emphasis on the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act?
The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act is something that is alive and well and has been there for the past 25, 30 years and is an example of how this problem should be addressed. And finally, our European friends are doing something similar. But in January, the presidents will get together. They will talk about how to get economies to grow through an emphasis on small and medium-sized enterprises, which generate roughly 60% of the jobs in the hemisphere and
represent over 90% of the companies throughout the region. And that is one of the key challenging points for many of the smaller economies throughout the hemisphere. So what are we going to do to address the needs of the small companies?
What we're going to do is to see if leaders will agree to commit to cutting the amount of time needed to start a small or medium-sized enterprise in half.
And how does that work?
Well, what they have to do is modernize their system, their bureaucracy. They have to exert the political will to get this done. This doesn't cost money. It takes political will. Get it done, change the regulations, change the laws, streamline the procedures, get it done.
But there are many things that do require money, and as you know, many of the Latin American countries are lacking in a number of resources. They have problems getting computers in the administration. For example, when I lived in Argentina, the administration had so few computers it was embarrassing. So how do we address the lack of resources in terms of a financial perspective for...
We think that countries do have their own resources to spend. The challenge is to spend their money better and
appropriately,
more wisely. Yes. In addition, there are financial resources from abroad that are there that can be tapped. Technical expertise can be achieved through the Inter-American Development Bank and other organizations. But countries have to open up the ability of small and medium-sized enterprises to function. They have to get at the whole property system so that property is used as a basis for credit for people to buy homes and to invest in businesses. For them to build their credit report,
which is another growing concern throughout the
Well, in much of Latin America, property cannot be used as collateral. There's no system for it to be used as collateral, and that has to change. It's called modernization. Thirdly, there are remittances that come from abroad. People send money back to Latin America and the Caribbean, $32 billion a year, which greatly eclipses any amount of development assistance. And then, so the name of the game there is to reduce the cost of sending remittances so that more money.
So more wealth can be brought back to the home countries.
That's right. In terms of education, it's straightening out the education system, decentralizing it, and introducing report cards for education systems.
Sounds like a good idea. So what are some of the other initiatives that we can expect to see as an outcome of the next Summit of the Americas?
Well, all of the ones I just mentioned on the economic side, plus investing in people, education, and health. And on the health side, the emphasis should be on fighting AIDS, HIV/AIDS. The Caribbean is the second area of most AIDS incidents in the world after Africa, and what we would hope to do is make sure that medication gets to 90%, at least 90% of the people who require it. Then there is the governance side, and we need a commitment from leaders to make progress in the transparency area, in cleaning up the issuance of contracts, how governments do business internally, how they do business with the private sector, how they run their customs and their tax systems. Progress. No one is looking for a night-to-day miraculous change, but measurable progress by a specific period of time. It's time to get beyond the rhetoric
and start putting it into practice.
The hechos concretos, as we say in Spanish.
Sí, señor. We are here today with Ambassador John Maisto, the current U.S. Ambassador to the Organization of American States. Stay tuned. We'll be back after this break.
AIDS has created over 14 million orphans worldwide. That's the equivalent of every child under 5 in America, with no one to watch over them. Please, won't you help?
Welcome back to Miami's Global Connection. We've covered a number of intriguing topics today. I would like to thank my guests, Ambassador Luis Lauredo and Ambassador John Maisto, for making the trip from Washington and taking the time to share their thoughts on the progress of the FTAA negotiations and plans for the upcoming Summit of the Americas held in Mexico in January of 2004. The sponsor of our show is the United Nations Association, dedicated to promoting the ideals of democracy, education, healthcare, human rights, and peacekeeping. For more information, please contact the United Nations Association on Brickell Avenue in Miami or visit the UNA website. Please tune in for our next program. I'm Whitney Belker, and this is Miami's Global Connection.